For those who are familiar with the train and buses in LA County, the Metropolitan Transit Authority runs our transit system. And over the last several weeks, there's been a series of violent attacks up to and including murder that have occurred on the trains and on the buses, which has alarmed the public and the board of directors of the MTA. But this is not new. Last week, and this is someone at early in the morning, I think 5 in the morning, a lady getting off a train, she was stabbed in the neck by someone who had already been ordered not to be on the trains. But since there's no way of monitoring their presence, and unprovoked stabbed and killed this lady. She was an immigrant from Nicaragua, saving money, working to go back to her native homeland. She was a grandmother, totally defenseless, and she was killed. We had someone set on fire on the train on the Gold Line a couple of years ago. He was set on fire twice by another homeless person. And you have the death of Sandra Shell, the RN nurse, who was killed at Union Station by another homeless person. The transit system is supposed to transport people. It's a transportation system. It is not a homeless center. It's not a homeless shelter. That's not its purpose. Yet the board of directors wants to use it as its purpose. These people, the board of directors, they have blood on their hands. They weren't the one that stabbed that lady to death, but they created the circumstances that allowed for her to be harmed. Just like the ladies that were raped on the trains, the ones who were robbed and were beaten, the ones who were shot, stabbed, set on fire. All these things that are horrendous, they happen all the time. And the MTA hides the evidence. They don't release publicly any of the information. When I was sheriff, they threatened to sue me if I released video of attacks on the trains, saying it will harm their perception of safety. So they really wanted to hide the threat on the trains because they don't care about the safety of their passengers. They care about the perception. Well, the impact is that anyone who rides the trains or the buses is subjected to an incredible amount of violence, degradation of safety, personal invasion of space. Everyone who's there to use a bus or the train for transportation has to basically subject themselves to an untold potential of violence. For the people who don't use it, what's going to happen is that more people are going to be afraid of using the buses and the trains, so they're going to forget public transportation and they're going to go to jumping on the freeways in their cars. So you're going to see more traffic, more congestion, which the public transit system was supposed to alleviate. And the taxpayer is footing the bill for everything. It makes no sense whatsoever. People are going to ask the question, how did we get to where we're at today? Well, we can stem the beginning of the mess to 2017. And that is when the MTA board of directors decided to remove the contract exclusively from the sheriff's department and divide it into 3. The sheriff's department, LAPD, and Long Beach. That was one part. The second part, they ordered law enforcement to not enforce fare evasion. Quality of life issues, they were forbidden from enforcing. And they hired a private security supposedly to address quality of life issues. And then they created a metropolitan court, Metro Court, that was supposedly supposed to deal with the citations written by private security. But it turns out this Metro Court doesn't do anything in reality. It's just a paper game, a paper shuffle. So there's no accountability for anyone who abuses a system, for the homeless crowd that lives on the trains, on the platforms. Notice there's no restrooms on trains. So start doing the math. And that's how everything started falling apart. The ridership fell. Pandemic came along. The ridership fell even further because of the pandemic. And now the only thing that's forcing an increase in ridership is because people can't afford to put gas in their cars. The economy is putting people that really don't want to be on public transportation on the buses and the trains against their will. So this is kind of where we're at today. And what we're seeing now is the board of directors is basically engaged in virtue signaling. They believe that the presence of law enforcement is harmful to the passengers. They're afraid. Yet their own surveys overwhelmingly says that passengers want to see more law enforcement. So what does the board do? They hire ambassadors in these bright green shirts. And the ambassador is supposed to make everyone feel safe. And it is absolute lie. They are not part of public safety. and they're just fooling people into believing it's a secure system. Well, the steps that we can do to fix it is we need to undo the damage created. The board of directors appointed a public safety advisory committee. That advisory committee voted unanimously to create the goal of removing all law enforcement from the trains and buses. Really, that's their goal. Get rid of all of law enforcement. We have to stop that goal. The board wants to create a Metropolitan Transit Authority police. Well, we had RTD police 20 years ago, and that was a failure. It was disbanded. And we're not going to we can't attract people to become sheriff deputies or LAPD officers. How on earth are you going to attract people to a Metropolitan Transit Authority? And that plan is designed to reduce even further the presence of law enforcement and increase the presence of these ambassadors, who are nothing but people who just watch things happen and then they're on their phone. That's all they do. I can get people to do that for free right now. So that we have to undo that damage. We have to let law enforcement do the job of actually enforcing the law. We have to enforce fair evasion. These are not options. These are things that any transit system in the entire world operates under these assumptions and don't have the problems that the LAMTA has.
If you haven't checked out CaliforniaInsider.com, we highly recommend you do that now, because we're going to have a lot of news and videos there. And on top of what we have there right now, we are building a really big platform to cover what's happening in California, so you can be informed. We're going to have more shows, more videos from all aspects of life in California. Go to CaliforniaInsider.com and we'll see you there.